Professional golf is in chaos right now. Not the kind of chaos you see on the course, bad shots, missed cuts, or a controversial rules decision. This is different. This is legal chaos. This is the kind of mess that happens in courtrooms, not fairways. For 2 years, we have watched the war between the PGA Tour and LIV Golf tear the sport apart. We watched players leave. We watched lawsuits fly. We watched the so-called unification get announced, with all the hype in the world. And then we watched it freeze, collapse, and die. Now, 3 players are still standing in the middle of the wreckage. 3 players who refuse to back down. And leading them, at least in spirit, is the most controversial name in golf history, Phil Mickelson. I think Mickelson and these 3 players are either the biggest heroes or the biggest villains in golf right now. Where do you stand? Drop your take in the comments and subscribe if you want to see how this whole thing ends. But before we get to the lawsuit, before we name the 3 rebels, and before we explain why the unification froze, we have to go back to the beginning, back to when this war first started. Because without that context, none of this makes sense. 2 years ago, everything changed. That is when LIV Golf arrived. And when it arrived, it did not ask for permission. It just started signing players, big names, major champions, Hall of Famers. They threw money at them, unbelievable amounts of money, and many players said yes. And it was not just the money. LIV offered a schedule that made sense for guys with families. 14 events instead of 30 plus, no cuts, guaranteed payouts. For a grinder on the money list, that offer looked like a lifeline. For the superstars, it looked like leverage they had never had before. The PGA Tour did not take that well. Not at all. They saw LIV as a threat, a direct attack on their business. Their response was immediate and brutal. They threatened to ban any player who joined LIV. Lifetime bans, no exemptions, no second chances. If you left, you could never come back. That threat was not empty. They actually did it. Players who signed with LIV were suspended. They could not play PGA Tour events anymore. They could not earn FedEx Cup points. They could not qualify for majors through the PGA Tour pathway. Their careers were effectively over in the eyes of the establishment. And here is the part people forget. It was not just about losing tournament starts. These players lost their sponsors, their equipment deals. The PGA Tour controlled the entire ecosystem, and when you got cut out, everything dried up overnight. For most players, that threat was enough. They stayed put. They chose security over risk. They chose the devil they knew. But not everyone. 11 players looked at that threat and decided to fight back. They did not accept the bans. They did not accept the suspensions. They hired lawyers, and they sued the PGA Tour until only 3 were left. 3 players who refused to quit. 3 players who kept fighting when everyone else walked away. And the one name everyone expected to stay, Phil Mickelson, was not among them. 3 players out of 11. That is all that remained. But who were they? And why did they refuse to back down while the rest surrendered? The answer to that question is the key to understanding everything that came next. Now, those 3 players are back in the headlines. But this time, it is not the same lawsuit. This is something new, something more dangerous for the PGA Tour. And the man who started it all, the man who was the face of the original revolt, is once again at the center of the storm. In June of 2023, both sides announced a truce. A framework agreement. The PGA Tour, the DP World Tour, and the Saudi Public Investment Fund said they were going to merge. They were going to unify professional golf. The war was over, or so we thought. Now, the lawsuit is back. But this time, it is different. This time, it is not 11 players. It is not a bunch of names you recognize, and some you do not. This time, it is a coordinated attack. A legal strategy designed to hit the PGA Tour where it hurts the most. And the 3 players who refused to give up the first time are leading the charge once again. The first lawsuit shook the PGA Tour. This one could break it. But to understand why these 3 players are so dangerous now, you have to understand who they actually are. And that means finally putting names to the faces. Let us start with the most famous name on the list. The one everyone expected to lead this charge from the beginning. Bryson DeChambeau. Bryson DeChambeau. When LIV came calling, Bryson said yes. And when the PGA Tour threatened to ban him, he did not back down. He was one of the first players to file the original lawsuit. He was one of the loudest voices in the room. And when other players started dropping out, Bryson stayed. He was the lead plaintiff, the face of the legal fight, the guy who refused to surrender. And you have to understand what Bryson was giving up. This is a guy who won the US Open in 2020, a guy who was a top 10 player in the world, a guy who had a built-in audience of millions because of his YouTube channel and his one-length irons. He had a brand that existed outside the PGA Tour structure, but he still wanted the tour to answer for what it did, not just to him, to every player who got locked out without a hearing, without due process, without a say in how the tour was run. But Bryson is not alone. He has two other players standing with him, and their stories are very different from his. The second player is Peter Uihlein. If you do not know that name, do not feel bad. He is not a household name like Bryson. He has not won a major. He has never been a superstar, but he is one of the most interesting players in this entire saga. Peter Uihlein was the 2010 U.S. Amateur Champion. He played college golf at Oklahoma State. He had a solid career on the DP World Tour and the Korn Ferry Tour. He never became a star, but he was a grinder, a guy who worked hard and kept his head down. Then LIV came calling, and Peter said yes. What makes Peter's case different is the timeline. He spent years trying to earn his PGA Tour card through the Korn Ferry Tour. He did all the things the system asked him to do, and then the system locked the door behind him the moment he explored another option. That is what fuels him. Not money, not fame. The principle that the tour should not get to decide his entire career with a single punishment. Bryson DeChambeau has the fame. Peter Uihlein has the resolve. But the third player is the one who might surprise you the most, because he is the quietest of the three. And sometimes, the quiet ones are the most dangerous. The third player is Matt Jones, an Australian golfer who has spent most of his career flying under the radar. He has one PGA Tour win. He has played in a few majors. He has never been a headline grabber. But when the lawsuit started, Matt Jones did something that surprised everyone. He stayed. Think about that. A guy with one win. A guy who is not going to get a lifetime Ryder Cup captaincy. A guy who is not going to get a broadcast booth on ESPN when he retires. He had every financial reason to settle, take whatever the tour offered, and move on quietly. But he did not. He looked at the legal arguments, looked at what the PGA Tour was doing to control where players could earn a living, and he said no. He stayed in the fight. So there they are, three players. Bryson DeChambeau, the famous leader. Peter Uihlein, the quiet rebel with nothing to lose. And Matt Jones, the everyday player who refused to back down. Three very different men. Three very different reasons for fighting. But one common goal. They want to beat the PGA Tour in court. And they are not alone. Behind them, in the shadows, is the man who started it all, Phil Mickelson. That is the full list. Three names, three rebels. But now the real question becomes much bigger. Why did the unification freeze? Because the promise of a merged tour was the only thing that could have ended this war. And without that promise, these three players have no reason to stop fighting. Phil Mickelson is the godfather of this rebellion. He was the first big name to join LIV. He was the loudest voice defending the move. He was the one who called the PGA Tour a dictatorship. He was the one who said the tour's behavior was disgusting, and he was the one who encouraged other players to stand up and fight. Mickelson is still involved. He is still funding the fight. He is still advising the players who stayed. He is still a central figure in this drama, but he is not a plaintiff anymore. He is the shadow leader, the man behind the curtain, and that makes him even more dangerous. He can attack the PGA Tour without being the target of their counterattacks. In June of 2023, the golf world was stunned. The PGA Tour, the DP World Tour, and the Saudi Public Investment Fund announced that they were merging. They were creating a new entity. They were unifying the sport. The war was over. The players could come home. The lawsuits would be dropped. It was a miracle. But the deal was never signed. It was never finalized. The framework was just that. A framework, an outline, a promise that was never kept. Why did it fall apart? There are three main reasons. First, the Saudis pulled their money. The PIF had committed to investing $3 billion into the new entity. But by April of 2026, they had changed their minds. They had spent over $5 billion on LIV Golf over 5 years, and they had nothing to show for it, so they walked away. No more funding, no more investment. The money was gone. Second, the PGA Tour got a new CEO. Brian Rolapp took over in 2025. He came from the NFL. He was tough, he was direct, and he made his position very clear. He said there would be no merger. He said there would be no conversation. He said the PGA Tour was focused on its own future, not on LIV Golf. That was a massive shift from the previous leadership. Third, the U.S. Department of Justice got involved. They did not like the framework agreement. They saw it as anti-competitive. They raised concerns about the non-poaching clauses. They threatened to investigate. That made the deal much harder to finalize. And now they are back. Bryson DeChambeau, Peter Uihlein, Matt Jones. 3 players with nothing to lose and everything to gain. 3 players who believe the PGA Tour broke the law. 3 players who are determined to prove it in court. Now you know who they are. You know what they want. And you know why the unification froze. But the biggest question remains unanswered. What happens next? What happens to these 3 players if they win? What happens if they lose? And what does all of this mean for the future of professional golf? LIV Golf is dying. The Saudis are pulling their funding. The tournaments are being canceled. The players who left are looking for a way back. Some have already returned. Brooks Koepka came back at the start of 2026. He had to pay a fine. He had to apologize. He had to accept that he would not get the same treatment as players who stayed. Patrick Reed also returned. He is trying to earn his way back through the DP World Tour, and that is the reality for most of the guys who left. They are coming back with their tails between their legs, paying fines, giving up prize money, accepting conditional status. They are swallowing their pride because they need to play. But these 3 players looked at that path and said they would rather fight than apologize for wanting a free market. If they win, it could change everything. The PGA Tour might have to open its doors to all players. The lifetime bans could be ruled illegal. The antitrust laws could be rewritten. Professional golf could become a free market, where players can choose where they play without punishment. If they lose, their careers are over. They will never play on the PGA Tour again. They will be banned for life. They will be remembered as the players who tried to destroy the tour and failed. Their legacies will be tarnished, and the PGA Tour will emerge stronger than ever. That is what is at stake. Careers, legacies, the future of the sport, and 3 players who are willing to risk it all. I think these 3 players are either going to be remembered as heroes who saved the sport from a corrupt system, or as villains who tore it apart for their own gain. What is your take? Drop it in the comments and hit subscribe if you want to follow this story as it unfolds. The PGA Tour has been the dominant force in professional golf for decades. They have controlled the rules. They have controlled the money. They have controlled who plays and who does not. But that control is slipping, and the 3 rebels are the ones pulling the thread. Bryson DeChambeau has already won a US Open. He has already proven he can win without the PGA Tour. He does not need them, but he wants to prove that they were wrong. He wants to force them to change. And he has the money and the will to keep fighting. Peter Uihlein does not need the PGA Tour either. He has made his peace with the decision to leave. He has built a life outside the tour. He has found success on LIV, and he does not miss the grind of the PGA Tour schedule. He is fighting because he believes in the cause, not because he needs the result. Matt Jones is the wild card. He is the one who has the most to lose. He is not a superstar. He does not have millions in the bank. He needs the PGA Tour more than the tour needs him, but he is still fighting. That tells you everything you need to know about how strongly he believes in this cause. And Phil Mickelson is watching from the shadows. He is the mastermind, the strategist, the one who has been planning this for years. He has sacrificed his reputation. He has burned bridges. He has risked everything, and he is not going to stop now. The war is not over. It is just beginning. And the 3 rebels are not going anywhere. So what does the future hold? Nobody knows for sure. But one thing is certain. Professional golf will never be the same. The old system is breaking down. The players are demanding more control. The money is flowing from new sources. And the PGA Tour is fighting to stay relevant. The 3 rebels are at the center of it all. Bryson DeChambeau, the superstar with a chip on his shoulder. Peter Uihlein, the quiet rebel who refused to back down. Matt Jones, the everyday player who stood up for what he believed in. And Phil Mickelson, the godfather of the rebellion, pulling the strings from the shadows. This is not the end of the story. It is just another chapter, and the next chapter is going to be even more dramatic.